Okay, can you all see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay, so yesterday we have created the OData project. As part of that project, we have created an entity called bank and entity set called banks. Okay, um, and we have generated the runtime artifacts. If you see the runtime artifacts, there will be model provider class. In the model provider section, you will have base class and you will have extension class. Okay, you have development provider data provider class. In the data provider class section, you will have data provider class, base class, and data provider class extension. You will have a technical model name, technical service name. Okay. So the model provider class is the reflection of what you have created during the design time, meaning entity and properties below it. So if you go to the model provider class, you will see everything. Okay. Everything that you have created during the design time. In the data provider class, you will see all the methods for CRUD operations, create, read, update, delete. Okay. So those methods are not implemented. So let's say if you want to get bank's information, you got to implement write method for it. Similarly for create, read, update, delete. Okay. And if you look at this technical service name, this is what the people outside of SAP sees. Okay. So when you register the service, it will create a SICF node so that that SICF node will be accessible on the, outside of SAP. So we have registered the service, and if you see, okay, this is my service. I go to the gateway client, okay, and this is my service. If I go to gateway service builder, um, I think you got to remember these transactions. Once you use it for 1 or 2 times, you will remember it properly, I guess. So in the gateway service builder, you will see your OData project, and as part of the data model, you will see all the entities, all the entity sets, associations, navigation properties, and you will see everything. If I go to the bank, you will see all the properties. And I created, this entity based on a structure that I have already created. Okay. And if you look at the runtime artifacts, so there is a development provider class extension. We have discussed all of that stuff yesterday. Today we will see how to implement the corresponding methods for uh, getting banks, getting a bank, creating a bank, updating a bank, deleting a bank. Okay. So in the data provider class extension, we have seen all those methods. We have seen all those methods for creating, updating, deleting, and getting an entity. Okay. So initially I will implement get entity set method, right? Okay. Let's keep a breakpoint so that we will see what are all the input parameters and its values, so that we will know what to expect and all. So this is how you request an entity set. Okay. If you look at the URI, if you look at the URI, I mean this is path to your service. After that, you will just enter your entity set name. Okay. So when I go to, it hits this get entity set method in the data provider class extension. Let's see. If you see, there are lots of input parameters. You will see entity name. So the entity name is bank. What is the entity set name? Banks. What is the source name? Bank. So I mean this source name, you will see difference. Let's say when you are requesting, let's say an entity or entity set, um, from its associated entity or entity set, then the source name and the entity name that you are requesting is going to be different. We will see when we discuss associations and all, but for now, I mean, since we are requesting the same entity, you will see the same source name. Okay. Let's say if you pass the filters, this is where you receive the filters. This is where you receive the filters. Since we haven't passed any filters, um, and it does not have any filter options. Okay. In the exporting section, meaning we are exporting it to the caller, you will see et underscore entity set. It is an internal table of entities. Okay. We haven't developed, we haven't implemented our method, which we are going to do. Okay. So you will see this is what you are going to export it to the caller, et underscore entity set. Okay. Which is going to be collection of entities. If you look at the signature, right, this is what you are going to return. It is of type TT underscore bank. Let's say what the TT underscore bank is. TT underscore is bank is of type standard table of TS underscore bank. Let's see what is TS, what is type, structure type bank is. It is the structure that we created. Okay. So basically in the get entity set method, you are going to pass the collection of entities back to the caller. So I'm not going to complicate the business logic inside. I'm just going to look at the BNK table, and I'm going to read all the banks which exist in US and probably in state New York. Okay. So let me do some local data definitions. So data ls bnka type bnka. So this is the bank table. This will have all the fields. So I have defined a structure. So first I read, let's say um, we did not define our structure with all the properties in the table. We have only included certain set of attributes from this database table, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to read the table into an internal table, right? Then from that internal table, I'm going to transfer the corresponding elements to my structure. That's what I'm going to do. So KA type table of, okay, and I'm going to define my structure. Bank type ZLUI5 underscore bank. This is my structure, which I use it for. Okay, and I'm going to read the data from the table. Okay, select star from BNKA into table LT underscore BNKA. Okay, so if it is not initial, let's say where um, banks equal to, where country equal to US and state equal to New York. Okay, once I have some data, if LT underscore BNKA is not initial, right? What I'm going to do is loop at this internal table to the corresponding structure. Okay, so I'm going to move the corresponding fields to LS UI5 bank. Since I did not include all the properties from the database table, I'm doing this move corresponding. So only the properties which I used are going to be transferred. So then I'm going to append LS UI5 bank to ET entity set. Okay. Um, since ET entity set is, a standard table of my structure. So what I have done is I have read some of the records from the table and I loop through the table and I'm going to transfer the corresponding fields to my structure and I'm going to add my structure to the ET underscore entity set. Okay. Any questions in it? This is all business logic. Probably I hope you find it, I haven't done anything extraordinary, just get the data from the table and process it and send it back to the caller. Any questions? This is what the user is going to receive, ET underscore NT set with all the banks in country US and state New York. Okay. So let me go ahead and activate the class. So let me execute it now. So you will receive data in the XML format, okay? So you will see, okay, there is a bank with this bank key, Citibank, Park Avenue, New York. So you have received a lot of data in the XML format, okay? And you will see URL link for the, every particular entity in that entity set too, okay? Let's say if you want to see this information outside of SAP, you can just take the URL, and I have explained, this is the host name and port number of your ECC system, and in this path the service SICF node is created, and this is entity set in your entity. This is entity set in your service, okay? Let's say, if you pass the uh, user credentials here, so you will just start receiving your data in the XML format, okay? So we have implemented banks underscore get entity set method in the data provider class extension, and in the implementation what we have done is we have read a bank table with country key US and state New York, and once we receive the data we loop through that data, we process that data, and we added it to the entity set. So we will receive all that information in the XML format. So yeah, any questions?
Yeah, Sudhir, so when you copy the URL and pasted it, and when you're saying that it is now available to the outside world, actually, but then why do you have to enter the your user credentials? It is not actually available, right?
No, it is available provided that you have access to that data. Let's say if I don't have access to the CCC system, right?
Mm.
Then how can you provide security to it? Let's say if anybody can access sales orders or employee information from your business system, uh, how can you ensure safety and security? This is provided in a format which can be understood by several UI frameworks.
Okay.
But you can see, let's say if I run a function module, I can see that data similar to like this, right?
Right, it is not in this format.
No, no, outside of SAP, let's say if you want to execute a function module like this, how do you do it?
No, you cannot do that.
Yeah, that is the power of RESTful services, because there are lots of UI frameworks which can understand these RESTful or OData services. They can consume data, but provided they have authentication to get the data, right?
Mm. Right.
So if you pay attention to it, you will see all your properties, okay? What is your bank key, bank name, street, you will see city, state, everything that you have created an entity for, okay? And you will see key of it. And if you see, in the HTTP response, you will see a lot of other things too, okay? And what is the status code? When we discuss about the RESTful API, we mentioned that anything starts with 2 is a success. Status code is 200, means status station is okay. You will get lot of other stuff which we are going to explain it little bit later, and you will see content length here, okay? So when you request for the bank's information in XML, content length is 6767. Okay. But when we discussed about the RESTful APIs, we mentioned that you can get the information in two different formats. One is XML and the other one is JSON. Okay, let's see how to get the information in the JSON. Okay, and what is the difference? What are the advantages to see the information in the JSON format? If you see here, apart from the data that we represent in the XML format, this is your data. Okay, these properties is your data, but you will see lot of other stuff, lots of other elements in XML. Okay, but let's see how it appears in the JSON format. In order to request data in the JSON format, you will just add the system query option format equal to JSON. Okay. Let's say in XML, okay, but this is how you request information in the JSON format. You just add question mark, dollar symbol, format equal to JSON. These are called system query options. We are going to discuss it little bit later in the course. Okay, but this is how you add simply question mark, dollar symbol, format equal to JSON. Okay, if you want response in JSON. Okay, so I have added this system query option format equal to JSON, then I am going to execute it. So if you see the data, it is much cleaner. Okay, you will just see some metadata, and after that you will see all the properties, bank key, all your properties which you have defined as part of the entity. Okay, so if you see, you don't see all those unnecessary tags to represent this information. If you look at the HTTP response, okay, if you look at the HTTP response, it is the status code is 200, which means it is success. The status reason is okay, and there are a bunch of other HTTP response headers, and you have content length as 3987. So this is your content length when you represent the same information in XML versus JSON. Let's say when you see the size of it, it's around 30 to 40% less than the size when it is represented in the XML. So this is the advantage to communicate with the JSON format, especially when you are writing mobile applications, or especially when you are sending data over network. This is very efficient because you use less size to represent the same kind of information. Okay, that's why we are going to use JSON format in SAP UI5 or Fiori. So let's say, so here I'm just going to add the system query option, question mark, dollar symbol, format equal to JSON. So since I have this JSON view plugin on Chrome, earlier I have explained, so you will see the data in a much nicer format. Okay, so the outer curly brace says that, if you see any curly brace, it is the start of um, JSON object, and D is your entire payload, and in D, whatever you have seen inside of this D is your actual data. Okay, so in JSON, an array of objects is represented with square bracket. Okay, so you will basically just see a list of banks in the JSON format. Okay. So if you want to learn more about JSON, I mean, you should just go to this thing, JSON W3 schools. I mean, this is very simple. It is just I mean, key value properties. That's how you represent information in JSON format. You are not going to add any additional tags to represent data. It is just key value pairs, key value pairs. That's it. Even however deep the data might be. And if you want to, I mean, we will discuss, let's say whenever we are discussing the system query options, we are going to discuss, but let's say if you want to um, learn more about the OData system query options. So this is where you will learn how to request the data in the OData format. Okay. So if you have time, just go ahead and go ahead and look at this information. So how to create URLs or how to request the data in the OData format in the OData services and all. Okay. Any questions, guys, so far?
No, Sudhir, as of now.
Okay. So far we have just implemented getEntitySet method, but let's say if we want just to request one bank information, okay, how do you request it? Okay, what you do is, I mean, this is how you request, let's say whatever entity set might be. Let's say this is how you request a particular entity by passing the key values. Okay. This is how you you request for an entity. So in our case, we have just one key, then we are going to request like this as part of it. So this is our key, bank key equal to your value. So let's say if I want something like this, I'm just going to say, so this is how I'm going to request a single bank by passing the key. Since we just have one key, I mean, you don't need to mention the key name. But let's say if you have multiple key values, then you got to say like key 1 equal to value 1, key 2 equal to value 2, key 3 equal to value 3. Okay. So let me just go ahead and request an entity and see what will happen. So I'm going to do my URI. I mean, the URI will be like this. URI to get an entity. And the HTTP method I use is get. Okay. So let me just execute it. So what does it say? Methods banks underscore get entity not implemented in data provider class. So I mean when we go to, we know which method it will call in the data provider class extension. So this is the banks underscore get entity method. So this is your entity set name underscore get entity method. But since it is not implemented in
Yeah, it will go to the super class and
super
raise the
class.
error.
So in the super class, it will just raise an exception saying that this method is not implemented. So in
Okay.
order to get data, you got to redefine this corresponding method. Okay, you got to redefine this corresponding method in the data provider class extension. Okay, so I redefined it. So if you look at the signature, so I just don't, okay, let me just activate it. I'm not going to implement it so that we will see in debug what will happen when we request the data. So it comes to this getEntity method, but let's see what are all the import parameters that we receive. The entity name is bank, the entity set name is banks, and the source name is bank. So let's say when you request an entity or entity set directly, the source name and entity name is going to be one. But let's say when you are requesting an entity or entity set through associations, then the entity name and your source name is going to be different. We will see that in the later part of this course. And one of the key thing that we are looking at is IT underscore key tab. So this is where we receive all the keys that we pass as part of the URI. So if you look at it, you will see bank key. You will see the value that we passed. But if you see, we did not pass the key value. How did it know that is the key value? Anybody?
Because there is only one key.
Yeah. Let's say if there is multiple keys, then you got to say key equal to key 1 equal to value 1, comma, key 1 equal to key 2 equal to value 2. So you will receive all those names here. Okay. So
Hey, so
basically,
Sudhir, one question. So when we mention the key name in the URI,
uh-huh.
has it to be exactly same? I mean,
Yes.
like how bank key was capital B and K was capital. So does it have to be exactly the same or does not
Yeah, it
matter?
has to be exactly same.
Hmm. Okay.
Let's say if you look at your property, right? Okay, 1 second. So let's say, so if you look at your entity type and if you look at the properties, right? So this is the name. So you should exactly pass this. So that's why you need to keep the naming conventions, consistent. Let's say it starts with, capital letter, and each word in your key or each word in your property will start with capital word, capital letter followed by small letters. Okay, some call they may call it camel case or something like that. Okay,
Mhm.
so since I know that in the IT underscore key tab I'm going to receive the data, so I'm going to read the data first. Okay, so basically IT underscore key tab is of type table. So the line type is this one. Okay. And if you look at the line type, it has just name and value. This is the key name and key value. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the local data definitions. Key tab type. Okay. And I'm going to read with that key. I'm going to read it from my database table. So I'm going to define a structure. But since my entity is a subset of my BNKA table, I'm going to define another structure. Thanks. Okay. So I will read the table. That's why whenever you are doing code, I mean, just look at all the import parameters. So you will get all the information you want, I mean, from this. These are all classes so that you can just dig into these classes and look at all the methods, look at all the attributes. So, I mean, you know when to use those methods and all. I'm just writing these comments so that, I mean, you will understand, I mean, initially you will understand what I am doing at which part. Okay. Read IT key tab. Read table IT underscore key tab into ls key tab with key. If you see the structure, there are only two fields, name and value, right?
Yep.
Name equal to bank underscore key. Okay. So if this ls underscore key tab is not initial, okay, let's see what we will do if it is initial. But for now, just don't bother about it. Okay, if it is not initial, right, then what we do is select single star from BNKA into ls BNKA where bank L equal to this ls key tab underscore hyphen value. Okay, so if this ls BNK is not initial, if we find the record, else we can send an error message back. We will see that one later. Okay. So simply I'm going to move. So this is the advantage when you create, I mean, your structure with the exact, I mean, field names in your table. I mean, instead of transferring one by one, I mean, just keep the, in your structure when you create, you just keep the field name same. But when you create the entity, you can change the property names, which will be used by outside. Okay. Move corresponding ls bnka to
ER entity.
yep. So we will see if there is any problem. We will see how to send the error message back. But for now, we'll just concentrate on how to get this information. Okay. So let's see, now I request the same information, so you will get the data. Okay. So similarly, I'm just going to add the system query option format equal to JSON so that I can receive the data in the JSON format. So I mean, this is the bank that I requested. These are all the properties. Okay. So okay, let me show it in the, let me show it here in the browser. Okay, so I mean, if you see the JSON structure, the outside curly braces represent it is a JSON object. So all the JSON objects starts with curly brace and close with curly, end with curly brace. Okay, and inside this curly braces you will see D, meaning, this is your entire payload. Okay, and after that you will see a curly brace and inside it is actually your information, and in it you will see metadata of that entity. What is the ID and what is the URI to get to this entity. If you see, it is the same entity that we use to get it. So in the metadata it will give you the URI and what kind of entity type it is. After that you will see all the properties you define as entity. Okay. This is, JSON is pretty straightforward and simple. We don't need to have any extra tags to represent information. So this is very simple. Any web browsers and all would understand, all the UI frameworks will understand. So, you need to understand in order to write SAP UI5 applications. Any questions?
No.
Okay. So, let's just recap it what we have done when we talk about the RESTful APIs, right? RESTful API, we talked about, RESTful APIs are resource based. Okay. And we said that everything that you see in a service is a resource. After that, we said that it is, you pass the representations between client and server. So when you request a resource, basically you will receive a representation of that resource instead of the resource itself. Okay. And the third one is, we said that we use HTTP spec. And okay, I'm sorry. One more thing is, you identify a resource through
Metadata.
URI.
Okay.
You identify a resource in the RESTful API through URI, meaning unique resource identifier. URL is one form of the URI. Okay. And we said that we use HTTP spec or HTTP methods. Right. And in the constraints we say that it is a client server, and we said that it is stateless, and we said that it is cacheable, and we said that it is a layered system, and we said that code on demand. This is an optional constraint. So let's see, since we have created a OData service, right? Let's see whether we have stick to these basic tenets and principles. Okay. So when we look at metadata, when you look at the metadata, you will see a resource called banks, which is of, it is a collection of resources called banks, and the real resource is bank. Okay. So whatever we have seen in this OData service is a resource. Banks is a resource, bank is a resource. Okay. And when we request for a resource, how do we do it? When we request for a, okay, so when we request a bank URI, when we request a bank resource, how did we request? This is, we use URL to request a resource. So what did we receive? What did we receive? We received just a representation. This is not exactly what we have in the database table. Let's say for a bank, you have some more information which we did not create as part of the entity. So we just received a representation of the bank exist in the database table, right?
Mhm.
Okay. And we said that we use HTTP spec. If you look at the developer tools, for Chrome or anything, if you click on function F12, you go to the developer tools, right? So here you will see all your network traffic. So if you see, we use the HTTP header, we use HTTP request method get. So even from the NetWeaver gateway client, when we request for certain information, we choose HTTP method get. Okay. So we use HTTP spec in order to request data, and it is, we said that it is client server. So this one is client. This is just a Google Chrome. So it is a client. So you just request information here so that the representation will be received from the server to the client. Okay, it is a client server architecture. So when you request for this information, the server, after it serves the request, the server did not even know, you requested the data. It just received the request and processed the request and send you the response. Okay. Um, if you, if you have ever done a WebDynPro application, right? Let's say if you execute a function module, it is called service call. If you did a service call, if you go from one view to the other view, and you can still access that context, from your WebDynPro, you can still access the service call because everything is stored in your user session. But here you don't see anything like that. So it is stateless. You just, server just receive the request and send you the response. That's it. It don't have any knowledge about who has requested for which resource or which information. Okay. We have not discussed, cacheable. We will discuss it, little bit later in the course. When we say layered system, this is not a layered system. Okay. We are directly connecting to where the OData service is hosted. But in a central hub deployment, which we discussed, it goes to the server and it goes to the gateway hub. From gateway hub, the request go to your ECC or business backend system. So in this case, it is not, so what it says is client should not assume that it is directly talking with the server. In this case, it is not true, but in most of the productive scenarios, probably client is not going to interact directly with the server. Probably it will hit the gateway hub. From there, using a trusted RFC, it will get the data from the business backend system. So in this case, client talks to server, okay, but in productive scenarios, you will have layers in between. Okay, so we did not discuss cacheable, but all the other basic tenets and constraints have been satisfied. So it will technically be a RESTful API. Probably you might not need all this information, but let's say if you want to write a OData, you will just pick up a blog and you can just write it without even knowing what it is about. But knowing this stuff, whenever you discuss with your clients or whenever you talk at little bit higher forums, you need to have all that information. So I'm just giving you all that information so that sometime in your life, professional life, it will help you. Okay. This is about how to request entity sets and how to request an entity. Any questions? Okay, so we'll see another little part here. Let's say if we did not send any, let's say if I just, don't give anything, there is somebody who has created with, space. That's why you are getting this record. Okay, let's just send some dummy information. So it just say resource not found for a segment bank. But let's say if you want to send, some message back from the ECC business backend system, okay, how do you do it? So let's say if that is not found in here, let's say if you see here, it's a business exception in MGW and there is technical exception. Since it is a business exception, I'm just going to raise exception type. I'm going to pick this type. I'm going to raise a business exception. Okay, IW BEP CX MGW exception. So this is the exception. So this is the exception class. But let's see in the constructor what are all the information that we need to pass. So I hope when you know classes, you know constructors too. So I assume it. So if you look at the constructor, you will have several parameters. One is the text ID. Okay. Uh, you will see the text. You will see business error. So for this business error, you are sending a parameter called message. Okay. So when I'm going to raise the exception, I'm just going to say exporting text ID equal to, so I have a text ID in this class called business error. I'm going to access an attribute of this class, so I use this symbol, error, and the message that I want to pass is you don't have a you don't have a bank with the key. Uh, okay, so I'm raising a business exception by using this class, and whenever you are raising, exception of this type, you are going to pass the text ID. And the text ID is, if you look at this class, you will have a business error text ID, so I'm going to use it. And to that business error text ID, you need to pass the message. This is your custom information that you wanted to send it to the client. Okay. So let's say if I request information about a bank which you don't have it, so you will just see the custom message. You don't have a bank with the information that you passed. Okay. So similarly, let's say if I just pass the information from here, so it just in the error message, it just says, the value you don't have the bank. Probably you can just pass the key that user passed it to. So this is how you send a uh, business exception from the back end, so that the client knows that there is some problem with the information that I have passed. Okay. Any questions? Okay. I think that is it for today. We will see tomorrow. We have discussed how to request for the entity set, how to request an entity. We will see. We have seen how to raise a business exception, and we will see when we have created the OData service, it satisfies all the basic tenets and the constraints of um RESTful API, so that, okay.
Yeah.